Morning. Welcome everybody to our Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting for August 19th, 2026. We're going to start off with a work session between District Attorney Chris Perosa and Sheriff Carl Wilkerson. Looks like we have Chief Deputy Speldridge at the table also. Thank you. Can you just kick us off?
Yes, that's all right, Chair.
Absolutely.
Just a few comments. First, I want to acknowledge that Faye Stewart is here in the audience joining us today. Faye was one of two co-chairs who served on the Public Safety Funding Task Force. And I wanted to touch on this report a little bit. Thought it was a good opportunity to take a walk down memory lane. We'll go, so a little bit of history. We're not going to go quite as far back as when the earth cooled, but close. You know, we talk a lot in our annual budget process about how the big, thorny, intractable issue in Lane County is the artificially low permanent property tax rate that we have, and that is the reason. It's a pretty simple reason that's been very difficult to solve for why our public safety system in Lane County is underfunded. $1.28 is our permanent rate. That's one of the lowest in of all counties in the state of Oregon. When you stack up the various levies and districts that exist among our comparables, we are by far the lowest. And so the board in 2023 authorized the creation of a task force led by 11 residents in Lane County, geographically diverse, different backgrounds and experiences. And you asked these 11 individuals to try to tackle this issue and help us try to find a path towards a solution. As the board knows, we've attempted many things. Of course, the jail levy was successful in 2013 with just over 50% of the vote. That was the first really successful effort to go to the community and say, we really need to stop the bleeding of our public safety system. 5 years later, the voters reauthorized that 5-year levy with over 60% support. And then 5 years after that, they reauthorized with just over 70% of the vote. So that's a really good sign, right? That we've been able to achieve some additional funding from our community to stabilize the corrections system. But of course, we know that the other piece of our Lane County public safety system, primarily around rural patrol and response to calls for service and prosecution, remain significantly underfunded. So the task force in 2024 met for the better part of 2024, came up with they wrestled with a lot of issues and presented the board with a series of recommendations. Of course, they asked for more engagement. They felt that the community needed to be engaged more, and they also said that the county needed to spend some more time really diving into some of the recommendations about new funding options. So we've been, this is 3 years in the works just from this last task force, but it's decades in the works in terms of the conversations that we have had around these tables to try to solve our long-term public safety funding issues. So we've spent a lot of time, we've taken these recommendations. We have an internal working group that is largely led by the sheriff and the district attorney that has been wrestling with some of the nuances. We've done some polling work, which we reported to the board. And today, the sheriff and the district attorney are going to present to you what their core basic needs are, the bare minimum that is needed. And so you're going to see a range of service options. And what we're seeking from the board is feedback and some directions on next steps to continue to advance this effort. So without further ado, we'll turn it over, I think, to Sheriff Wilkerson.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I'm sure that you guys enjoyed your break work in the building. So as you were doing that, we were putting together a little presentation for you. So I'm going to take you back in time a little bit to what I presented to the Public Safety Funding Task Force a couple of years ago, kind of say where we were in 2024. We're going to show you what we would be if we were the average, again, we are well below average of our comparable counties. And then, because we are Lane County and we do things the Lane County way, I'm going to show you what the minimum is of what we could do to kind of move the needle on services for our county. And that's not what the get us to average is, but just to kind of give you a layout of what we've got going on. And Faye, please, if I say something wrong, you can feel free to jump in and correct me, because you obviously led the task force. But I am going to hit back to some of the things the task force said, so let me go ahead and. So this is our current number. We have 0.2 deputies per 1,000 in Lane County. See our comparable counties, Marion County at 0.25 has considerably more deputies than us. Interestingly about Marion County though is, they're just an hour north of us, but they only have about a third of the geographic area that we have to cover. And they're not a timber county where we have a huge county, 54% federal lands, and we have more population, more county, more geography to cover. But just to kind of show you where our comparables are, in 2024, we are at the bottom of them. In fact, I have said to this body before that Lane County quite literally is one of the least patrolled counties in the United States, because Oregon is at the bottom of the list of officers per 1,000, and we as a county are at the bottom of the list of officers per 1,000 per county. So quite literally, we just don't have patrol staffing that the rest of the entire country has. So go ahead. To just kind of say what we had at that point, 81 people assigned to the Police Services Division. That includes our captains and lieutenants, our managers and administrators in that. But it also, about half of that is contracted employees from other entities to include, the cities of Creswell and Veneta, Oregon State Marine Board, our illegal marijuana group. We have, like about half of our folks are contracted by another entity, which means that they're paid to do a specific job at a specific kind of location. And they're not there for general patrol for the county. Why that's important is sometimes we'll have a big event and you'll see like 5 or 6 deputies there, and you're like, well, I thought Lane County doesn't have enough deputies. I thought the minimum staffing was 3. Well, quite frankly, we are shortchanging our contracts to some degree sometimes when a big event happens, a big emergency happens, by stealing people from other people or other entities' contract so that we can resolve that event. So far, we've had a good relationship with everybody we've contracted with, and they understand that when emergencies happen, we're going to send what we have to do that. But what I like to tell people when I explain the contract system is, if I hired a plumber to work on my house and my neighbor had a flood and an emergency, I'm totally okay with that plumber running over next door and helping my neighbor out and getting the water shut off. But it is my dime that's paying for him, so once he gets the water shut off, I want him to come back to my house and finish working on what I paid him to do. And that's kind of how we operate with these contracts. So, sorry, I just have to see where we're at. So to get to the average, and again, these are the 2024 numbers, we would have increased by 75 sworn deputies. That would have got us to like the average of our 5 comparable counties. That would have been a massive increase to patrol, our main office patrol, our detective division, a traffic safety team, and then what our community really wants and desires is to have more people out as resident deputies who have that direct connection to the community, who are doing that community community policing model. Quite literally, that is something that came as a popular term in the 2010s, but it quite literally is just what good policing has always been, is directly serving the community, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know the players, getting to know the who's, the whys, the wheres in the house, and having that community relationship where when something happens, they know who they're going to call. They have that relationship already, and they trust them. And that is honestly, that is how problems are solved and crimes are solved. So that would have put us, again, to get to the average a couple of years ago, it would have been 157 FTE within the division. Again, that would also be the folks, and remember we have folks assigned to things like civil. We are responsible for serving the courts of Wayne County, and all civil papers, protection orders, enforcement orders are not something that just regular municipal police officers do. That is something that the sheriff's office is required by statute and state constitution to provide. Additionally, that's also our SAR folks, who I think you'll hear a little bit more about this from Tom in a few minutes, but those folks additionally serve the entire county, whether you live in the heart of the city of Eugene or not. In fact, this last month, I think we've had over 6 missions inside the city of Eugene for SAR just to help them find missing people who were demented or had issues that necessitated the need of our services to come help find them. So, keep going. With that, obviously, you can't just have folks on the road without having our support services people to do the back end work or the unsung hero work, which is include our dispatchers, our property evidence, and our records officers. And so that would have required an additional administrative or back side of the house support. So. When we were figuring this out, again 2 years ago, we, to have that ad, figured it would be somewhere in that range. I said to the task force at that time, I wasn't overly concerned about startup costs because the reality is you can't ramp up that quickly. There's no way you can hire that many people. And much like when we did the jail levy, we assessed at that time the local property tax and started collecting, and we couldn't get to the point where we needed to be quite as fast as we wanted to. So that would be the same as in this case, is that I don't think that we really need to worry about the startup costs because we just would never, if we were to get that 157 number, we'd never be able to staff it that quickly. So it would be a ramp up period, and that startup cost would be just kind of part of the equation of what we were taking. Much like the local option levy for the jail, if that were to happen, I would assume that honestly that we could scale a levy. If you remember, we actually at a point in time during the jail levy said, hey, we're collecting more than we need for right now. We're going to lock the number in at a lower rate than what has been approved by the voters, and we did that for some time until we actually got completely ramped up and the cost finally came to what the voters approved. So currently, or in 2024, our total operating cost was about $70 million. And that we would need about an additional $22 million to get to that new 157 number for FTE. For about a total, and again, $94, $92 million.
Is that per year? Is that per year?
Now, this is where I want Faye to interrupt if you can. So the task force literally got to look at all systems of the public safety system. We understand or appreciate that there are hydraulics in the system as a whole. The sheriff's office is just part of that. The DA's office is part of that. Health and Human Services is part of that. MCS is part of that. But what they really did is look at it all and then say, we can't fix everything. We can't do everything. Where does the most work need to be? Where do we need to do the most improvement? And through hearing presentations from everybody associated with the system, they ultimately said, look, the things that have the most need, the things that need to be shored up the most are rural patrol and the district attorney's office, and stabilized funding, continued stabilized funding for corrections. They said these are the parts of the system that we really need to focus on. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And so looking at that, they said, well, we probably need to get at least another $5 million for the DA's office, another $22 million for the rural patrol. Again, that is to get us not to good, not to above average, to get us to our county, our comparable county average, which would be that $22 million. They also talked about, if they could, is there a way to stabilize the local option levy for the jail, the corrections, and is there a way to incorporate that so that it's all one thing, and that part of the system is shored up, and we're not depending on a local option levy for every 5 years just to keep the jail running. Just to give you a little bit of background, before the jail levy passed, if you recall, we were CPRing or doing capacity-based release on folks with many felony charges, to include people who were in custody for manslaughter and other very significant charges. We were literally kicking them out the door with no conditions, saying, hey, you'll have a court date downrange, please show up. If you also recall during that time, because there was no off-ramps, no way to like kind of interject into their lives to kind of help them make it to court and to maintain some level of accountability, they continued to rack up more charges. And ultimately, by the time they held the custody long enough to go to court, they were usually looking at, like 10 or more felony charges and then spending significant amount of time in prison versus just us dealing with the original case and maybe trying to provide them services to get them into a different lifestyle at that time. And Chris, is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah, keep going. So what the task force said is, look, we need to come up with 27 million for the DA's office and patrol to get us to the average. 55 million would get us to roll in the jail. And then 95 million basically is that number of saying, what all do you spend for sheriff's office and the DA's office? So what the reason why that number is impactful is if somehow we, found enough pennies in the couch or we won the lottery and we got that 95 million, that would take the sheriff's office and the DA's office out of the general fund, which would open up those dollars to then serve and fund other county priorities. So that's why those three numbers are there. So again, I kind of covered this, but we are at 0.2 deputies per thousand. Again, kind of the lowest. At the time we were having this conversation, we're at 0.19. So apparently we did make some headway. But I'll be honest with you, I think mostly that, again, is because we've added more contracts to the sheriff's office. And if you I think there's just a lot to see here. If you look at some of these counties, it's funny that the small counties seem to be, off the charts of how many deputies they have. But in reality, if you look at like Gilman County, I think they have 7 deputies, but their population is like 5,000 people. So it really skews the numbers. So, and then if you look at our comparables, go ahead. We are back to what Steve was mentioning, is that the age-old problem of we have a property tax rate. Again, I want to say this for people who are listening to me. I know that people who live in the cities and stuff, that when they write that check to the Lane County assessment taxation, that can seem like a lot, but that's not what the county brings in. That could be their school bonds, that could be their city taxes, their fire board, and all those various things, because you write the check to Lane County and then we disperse it to all the other districts that collect money. But that is where we're at, and that's ultimately the problem. You see that places like Clackamas County and Deschutes County also have additional long-term funding associated, or permanent tax funding for public safety. Deschutes County's model, you guys all know this, is that they have a 2-tier system where everybody in the county pays the first part of the tier for all services that they are provided by the sheriff's office, and then a second tier if they're in unincorporated Lane County to provide patrol. So that just kind of goes back to the basis of the problem. Currently, and actually for many moons now, this is what, if you call 911, this is our 911 response. It's 3 deputies and a supervisor. Now those 3 deputies, we keep talking about those, can be anywhere at the county and you receive a call anywhere else in the county. So if they happen to be somewhere on a call up in Belknap Springs and the call is at, Hesita Beach Lighthead, they're driving for 2 hours regardless of the emergency that's happening. And that's driving fast. I think I've told the story before, but one time I really felt like kind of a silly person because I was in Walton and I got dispatched to a murder call up McKenzie Highway. I drove code, lights and sirens as fast as I could get there, had to stop on the way, get gas, so it felt like I was like fast up, get gas because I couldn't get there without gas. Then got up there, took me 90 minutes to respond, and I was still the first car there. That hasn't changed in the course of our time here, so. Keep going. So I'm gonna turn this over to Tom to talk to you about, go ahead,
So
Commissioner.
sorry, on the previous, that does not include the contract positions.
That does not, but that what that is the 911 response of main office patrol, what we have at any given time.
So
And-
dispatch doesn't dispatch any of the contracted positions, those get dispatched through whatever their contract call center is?
No, we dispatch them.
Right.
And again, going back to my plumber analogy, we will use them for emergencies. But this is what the minimum staffing is. This is what you're guaranteed to see is 3 deputies.
Right.
Contract deputies, generally because we are providing services to other entities, have times of day and locations that they want them to be at. So they're not generally on late evenings or throughout the night, so.
So that might explain why if you're in Walton, you were still the first car instead of the Mackenzie
Yes.
special assigned.
Right.
Because
And
they
even
weren't on
then-
duty at that time because they're not 24/7. Got it, thank you.
They're not 24/7, even then, like, for example, we have a contract with Oregon State Marine Board for a couple deputies to patrol the dunes. Just for those 2 deputies to get off the dunes and try to do something requires quite a bit of time because they're on a sand machine or whatever, and then they have to go back to wherever the truck is, jump in a truck and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, the minimum staffing for patrol is 3 deputies. Go ahead. So again, I'm gonna turn it over to Tom, and really, we, like the Lane County Way, said, hey, it's probably unlikely during this time and space to say, hey voters, how are we gonna come up with $95 million? But we also wanna say, hey voters, if you want to give us something, we wanna assure you that we can improve services that you're gonna see. You're gonna see an improvement in services, not just maybe 5 seconds quicker on a call response. So we really sat down and said, what can we do? What is the minimum level that we can bring to the table and say, you community, whether you live in the city of Eugene or live on the outskirts of Lane County, you will see an improved level of service. And Tom's gonna go over that. Again, this is the minimum level of, hey, what would we do to move that needle so that the community can see an improvement in public safety?
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Morning, everybody. So, like what the sheriff was just saying, you know, we worked really hard, strategically, I would even say surgically, looking at how we could best deploy an ad staff, best deploy them in a way that is going to have a great impact on the community, and they're going to be able to feel it, and it's tangible, and they can say, yes, there are more deputies out there. Yes, my needs are being addressed better than what was previous. And so, you know, with that mindset, I've kind of got an overview on what we would be looking at adding if we were able to. You know, overall, we would look at 61 FTE broken up, as you can see, almost all deputy sheriff positions. And then the positions needed the administration and supervisory that would be needed above that. And then additional the support positions. Obviously, when you put more deputies on the road, there's going to be more reports, there's going to be more radio traffic, there's going to be more paychecks to process. So all of those things are kind of, you know, I'm going to break it down category by category and talk about why we feel that this model is something that would be obvious to the community and a great impact. So right now, the sheriff had mentioned that we have, you know, a minimum staffing of 3 main office patrol deputies. We just don't have more deputies to be able to put more than 3 on a shift with their supervisor. If we were to add 10 deputies to the main office patrol, team, and of course a sergeant and a lieutenant to deal with you know, the added work. That would likely be able to allow us to increase our minimum staffing to 5. I'm not great with fractions, but that's almost double, if that's a good way to put it. But you know, certainly going from when you've got 3 deputies and any hot call is going to take 2, 3 or more deputies, you're wiping out that whole shift. At least with 5 deputies, if there's a priority call happening somewhere in one part of the county, chances are there's gonna be at least 2, maybe 3 other main office 911 response deputies that are gonna be somewhere else and able to respond to that, rather than that second emergency call having to pend until somebody is available. Thank you. All right, talking about visibility and having a true impact. You know, I gotta say, last weekend was a Saturday, and this is just the reality. We're almost numb to it at this point, you guys. We had, I think it was five Deweys, and I think out of the 5,
In 5 Dewey crashes in one shift.
yeah, that's what it is. 5 Dewey crashes, 1 shift, just on a Saturday night. Guys, that's a lot. That's crazy. And I gotta tell you, Monday, while we were planning, just doing our final preparations for these slides for today's presentation, while we were literally sitting in this room, preparing our slides, we had another fatal crash involving 3 juveniles.
That's crazy.
And you can't get numb to that, but it's almost like par for the course at this point in our county. We don't have the ability. I mentioned the deputies we have. Half of our deputies that are on the road are working for contracts, and they have specific assignments within their, within their respective area that they're contracted to police. And then we've got the 3 deputies that are running call to call to call to call all shift. There is no proactive enforcement. And I just wish, I look forward to the day that we're able to have deputies out proactively patrolling again for dangerous driving behaviors, DUIs, reckless driving, the types of behaviors that cause the fatal crashes that we have. We all know that we're consistently competing for the most deadly roadways in our state right now. And that's what we think that, if we were able to deploy 6 traffic deputies, a sergeant to supervise them, and then a dedicated waymaster, because our waymaster right now is contracted with Public Works. So the future of that position is, we don't know how it's going to go forever. But if we really had staffing to be able to put people out in the public, we would be able to assign those deputies to work specific DUI enforcement in the evenings, and we would have other deputies out of the 6 that would be able to work daytime assignments to deal with the speeding that we all see, to deal with, the folks that are oblivious to the world around them because they're too busy watching TikTok while they're driving home from work. That would have a huge impact on our community, and it wouldn't take long for our community members that are so used to never seeing traffic safety patrol to be able to say, yeah, people are driving slower now. Yeah, people are cautious before they pick up their phone, and let the world go by them. And we really feel that being able to spin up a traffic team again is not only going to be visible to public and something they can feel, it's going to save lives. Guaranteed it's going to save lives. Last year, the sheriff's office in Homeland mentioned there's hardly any time to do proactive patrol. It's all response. We had something in the ballpark of 250 DUI arrests last year. When the sheriff's office had a full-time traffic team, every single traffic deputy that was working a nighttime, evening, afternoon assignment was bringing in over 100 DUIs a year, themselves individually. And as a former DUI cop myself, I can tell you, when you stop enough impaired drivers, you can never, it's not a tangible, it's not something that you can quantify and prove, but there's guaranteed that whether it's that night or whether it's a night a year later when they decided not to drive again, you're saving lives. So to be able to have deputies that would be out there and able to, stop those, we definitely that would be a great impact on the community just to even have 6. All right, I also get to talk about resident deputies, and I feel like this is one of the areas that is so productive in community policing. After the Holiday Farm Fire, as you all know, the commission allowed us to be able to put a couple of deputies up in the McKenzie area to deal with recovery, right? I was fortunate enough to be selected to be one of those deputies. And what I can tell you is it was surprising how effective I was able to be with that community in preventing further crime and solving crime that was happening right now. So when you take 3 patrol deputies and they're running call to call to call throughout the entire geography of the county, they never really get an opportunity to learn the players in each area. They never get an opportunity to get to know the business owners. And they really honestly never get the opportunity to really build any type of deep relationship that would allow for follow-up and continuing education about what's going on in the community. When I got to work in McKenzie, it didn't take long before I knew the business owners, the community members that had a voice in the community, and it didn't take long for me to get to learn the players either. And in fact, just being up there in that same general area every day and, interacting with the people up there, I was able to build great relationships with all of those groups right there. And in fact, I can remember one time where, somebody that normally isn't somebody that would entertain a relationship with the deputy sheriff, we had interacted before, and he called me up and said, hey, I know I've got my issues, but you need to look at him because he's the one that's stealing all of this stuff right now. And just keep my name out of it type of thing. It's really an effective model. And so we would be looking to deploy, this would be a great opportunity to be able to enhance the community policing model within our county. We would look to play this kind of a rough sketch, it could be adjusted as we get there. But, if we were able to put 4 deputies in West Lane, 2 deputies full-time up in McKenzie, a couple in South Lane, a couple out in the Oak Ridge area. That's an area that doesn't get explored very much due to calls for service. A couple more in the Lowell, Pleasant Hill area. Again, same situation. Maybe one Junction City, High Pass, Triangle Lake type of area, and then another one in Santa Clara. As we know, there's a lot of population in Santa Clara. Those deputies would not only be able to directly have those relationships within the communities in which they're working every day and getting to know everybody, but those deputies are also in the area to help supplement the main office patrol deputies that are running call to call to call to call. So when a call does come out in West Lane, if the resident deputies, if there's only one on, well, that's still one less from that pool of the currently 3, hopefully would be 5. And so you're gonna have that all across the county. You're gonna be able to see more community policing, more proactive measures towards community safety than just the reactive measures that we're able to take right now.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Tom, but one thing I want to point out too is that minimum main office number of 10 would not at all move the needle without the residency part of this, because that really would be a symbiotic relationship in the fact that you got to have, we can just never have that many resident deputies 24 hours a day, right? You have to have the 911 response. And the reason why that we can maybe run it at 5 minimum is that we would have resident deputies who can go out and do the follow-up on the cases that the main office deputies take. You still need to kind of look at the main office deputies as kind of 911 response, emergency response. Likely at a minimum of 5, they themselves still probably will not have the ability to do a lot of follow-up on the cases they take. But this is what allows that to happen, is that we have people out in the community who can pick up those cases and do the follow-up and stuff. So one without the other is not sufficient. You can't have just residents because you got to have somebody on to answer the phone 24 hours a day. And you can't have just that low a number of main officers and expect to see the needle. So this is about us looking at what can we do at a minimum to move that needle and that the community sees an improvement in service. So. Sorry, Tom.
No, thank you, Sheriff. Thanks for lining that out. Okay, so, currently, our detective division, it's rather small, and the almost full majority, other than the one property crimes detective that we were able to temporarily add with the SRS funding, is just responding to violent person crimes. Well, there's a lot of crimes that have a direct negative impact on our community, such as residential burglaries and people getting just their houses ransacked. And other than this temporary one detective right now that is able to work those cases as his regular assignment, a lot of those wouldn't be followed up on unless there is some obvious tangible lead. We would certainly look to add 3 detectives and then of course a supervisor to go with it. A couple of those detectives would be assigned to property crimes and solving those felony residential burglaries and business burglaries that just, you know, I don't know if you've ever been burglarized, but it's a complete invasion of everything that you thought you felt safe about in your home. So to be able to solve more of those cases, the community would feel that. And then also, whenever you solve a good case, you also deter another one. We would add to that, and then also domestic violence. We currently don't have the ability to have a detective dedicated to domestic violence cases and follow-up cases. Like I said, it's the super violent felony person crime cases that most of our detectives end up getting tasked with all the time. To be able to dedicate a domestic violence detective, you know, certainly that's something that this entire county would feel a difference with. Thank you. Another model that is gaining great success throughout the nation is co-response. We would certainly see a benefit in our community to have a co-response program. You know, currently, if there's a call for service, it may be a mental health type of call that you would think, oh, perhaps, you know, this would be a great call for service for, you know, just to send a mental health professional to. And but if there's any mention of, you know, of weapons, or the person has a history of being assaultive towards people, which a lot of people suffering from mental health issues are assaultive, then it's not something that is safe for just a mental health professional to respond to. And thus, that's when the police have to go. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So this is in addition to what we already have with mobile crisis, and these are specifically tagged to sheriffs for calls that involve a weapon or other dangerous behavior that our mobile crisis response would otherwise have to call in the sheriff anyway.
So, yeah, currently we have MCR. MCR, we dispatch for them.
Right.
So we get to say, oh, that's MCR, you got this. Go handle that. We're not going to send a deputy. That's not appropriate for a deputy. These are for those calls that now it's not an MCR response. It's just a deputy response. And to add to that, my plan, my goal to this was to not just the sheriff's office to be doing this, but Eugene has started some level of co-response. I would like to form partnerships with Eugene and Springfield and kind of follow the Marion County model, which is they have deputies, Kaiser Police, and Salem Police that all have co-response, and they go wherever the call is. So you could be a Kaiser deputy or a Kaiser officer out in the county, or a deputy in the middle of Salem, and I would like to join that work with the city so that we send the right resources to the right calls. This doesn't alleviate the need for MCR, because there's plenty of calls that MCR can go to without a deputy or an officer. This is for those calls that, hey, it would really be great to have a specially trained deputy and a mental health professional go together to try to problem solve. And there are those cases. I've talked to the sheriff in Marion County. There's those cases that it's going to be a law enforcement response, because there are things that we can't walk away from. Domestic violence calls, for example, may very well be associated to a mental health issue, but there's laws that say, hey, if you respond and you have probable cause to believe that somebody has assaulted somebody else or caused physical injury to somebody else and they're in a domestic relationship, they have to go to jail. That is a law. But having somebody there who can help that deputy or officer coach them through how to get that done and de-escalate it, and it's just the right response. So.
Great, thank you. And I recognize you're almost never called out to just deal with one individual. There's a constellation of people involved, and so somebody else might need that QMHP
Yes.
trained service, even though they're not the person that you're directly
I think that is an excellent
working
point.
with. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that we hit all the points on that last one. Search and rescue, you know, currently we have one search and rescue manager and 2 coordinators, and then over 100 volunteers, which really are the backbone for that program. Our search and rescue is responsible for everywhere in the county, not just the rural areas, not just the county areas, but, you know, within the cities. We've had a couple already this week. What do we have last week, like 6 or something in the city of Eugene, where our search and rescue folks were out looking for people with, issues with dementia and Alzheimer's and, memory care problems, or even I know of another in that same bit that was younger that was having some cognitive problems, and he needed to be found. And it's our search and rescue team that gets called by us. But our other agencies, the big agencies, even in the metro area, call our search and rescue because that's how the model is supposed to work. It certainly could use an expansion, and the ability to have one more search and rescue supervisor or coordinator would allow us to potentially recruit and train more volunteers, kind of build the program, because certainly they run their tails off all summer, all winter long. There's not a time of the year where they're not having missions. And again, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and something happens and you can't find your 9-year-old boy, the ability to find that person in a hurried manner is going to rely on our efficiency as a search and rescue program. The community would feel that.
And that's Willamette River Rescue, the Lowhead Dam, for instance, and Austin Bridge, where we get to calls every
day during the summer.
Yeah.
Every day during the summer, they'll have
Yep.
cameras.
Yep. Our search and rescue folks respond right there in the middle of the city for those things.
And just another note about them too, because you brought it up, Commissioner, is that they are all trained, boat drivers, climbers. They are a Swiss Army knife. So we have a Marine Patrol program, but they are part of that. They are constantly helping on Marine calls because we are fortunate enough to live in a very beautiful county with a lot of waterways. But with that comes a certain level of risk because people take it. So
That's where I met you, Sheriff.
All right, yeah. Okay, so, we're an organization currently of just over 300 employees. We have now for a long time cut any little ounce of fat that we could, and one of those areas that we're really short is we've got, one dedicated training position to train that entire agency and to coordinate training with outside agencies and whatnot. Certainly we're long overdue to be able to expand that program just a little bit. And if we were to add, another 61 FTE, certainly we would need at that point, not just want, we would need to add another training position to be able to handle that load. Thank you. Next slide. Same thing, our entire agency operates with 2 property and evidence technicians. They actually, one of them is dedicated almost entirely to body camera footage, which is a community expectation at this point, to have body cameras. And so, and it takes that much time for one employee to be able to handle all of that footage. So really we have one regular property and evidence technician. They backfill for each other, of course, and their work crosses over. But if we were able to put 61 more FTE out, certainly we would expect that there's going to be some more evidence and property to be handled. We would have to add a small expansion to that section too. Same thing, a lot of these slides speak for themselves. More reports would come from more employees. We would need to be able to manage those reports and public records requests and all the things that our records staff do. Same with dispatch, more radio traffic. We already run a very, very lean dispatch center. We operate only with 2 dispatchers, yet, some of the things we've done, we don't only dispatch for ourselves, we talk about contracts. We dispatch for Oak Ridge PD and Fire, Junction City PD, Coburg PD. We dispatch for a lot of different groups. We're about as thin as we can be. We can't add more employees without adding more dispatchers. And more employees means more fiscal processing. And so we would look to add just 1 position there too. Currently we have 3 plus their manager doing fiscal responsibilities for 300 people. If we were to add 60 more people, we would need to add another fiscal position. Sheriff, this is where I'm gonna hand it back to you, so thank you guys.
So again, I started off with like, what got us to average? I don't think we're in a place in time where we can ask the community to give us that. I just want to be clear. That is to get us to average. But, so again, Lane County Way, what can we do to really move the needle on service? And that's what I'm going to kind of finish up with. Tom's kind of explained to you what it is that we would do, which is not it's a significant add to the sheriff's office, but speaking of where the numbers would fall, it wouldn't be a significant add to our county average. But it would be something that whether you live in the city of Eugene or the city of Springfield or a rural resident, you will get to see the needle move and will appreciate or should appreciate the change in service. Oftentimes people who live in the city say, hey, we pay taxes already and we have a police department. Why do we need the sheriff's office? Well, I'm going to remind you that everything we've talked about has kind of a city connection to it. The property crimes example. It's not just our rural residents who are suffering from property crimes. Unfortunately, people who do burglaries and thefts and such don't care about jurisdictional boundaries. They, in fact, oftentimes what you'll see when we go to the search warrants that we have out in the county is that we're recovering as much property that was stolen from burglaries within the city as we are from the county. And having a team of folks that can put those cases together, gets property back to people who live in the city and people who live in the county. And frankly, they know that the county is a good place to do business and to be their location where they trade and sell in their stolen goods because we have such little service. So having a group would not just impact the county residents, but it would also impact the city residents. I think it speaks for itself that SAR is a all-county thing. I will tell you that we kind of keep track of who we're rescuing out in the county, even when we're not doing these city missions. And by and large, the people that we are going out on missions are people who live in the city. You don't get to enjoy this beautiful county like the mountains or the coast without traveling through the county. And it's those locations where our city residents are finding themselves in need of our services, and we're constantly using our SAR folks to provide services to the city residences. I think the co-response model kind of speaks for itself. Again, it would be my goal to team with both the other cities and say, I don't care where that call of service is. I don't care if you're wearing blue or a better uniform in tan and green. You will go to that call. And that's just something that I think really can move the mark in service. Because when you have a specially trained deputy with a qualified mental health professional working in concert to resolve problems, it is something that is a beautiful thing to see. So again, I hit on it, but you can't do one or the other and see the needle move when I'm talking about resident deputies and main office patrol. If you want to see a real impact and you only want to change the minimum staffing for main office patrol, that number has to be like triple what we are proposing. It has to work in concert with resident deputies, otherwise it just doesn't work. Frankly, adding 2 deputies per shift is only going to change a small amount of calls for service response time, but the impact of having that together is very impactful on what we can do for follow-up, what we can do for preventative. Again, Tom talked about we don't have the proactive, our deputies don't have time for proactive patrols. So like they go from call to call to call, or they're spending their time watching their evidence or writing their reports. The resident deputies can do that proactive work, and it can be very specific and very targeted to the needs of the community. We have points in time where our transfer stations are getting broken into, and we don't have the ability to kind of target that. But when you have resident deputies, they can target those kind of problem issues, the things that, the quality of life issues that our community members within rural Lane County feel we don't get to target. But with resident deputies, we can target that. We can know who, what, where, when, and how, and really work with the community to problem solve. The other thing that we don't do a lot of is get into our schools. Like I said when you guys all interviewed me for this position, that my priority is kids. And if we don't have that connection with schools, how do we know how to respond and help those schools? We have 9 school districts within Lane County that aren't within the cities. We need to be servicing those schools, we need to be servicing those kids, and that's where resident deputies come in. I think that we have, I'll hit traffic just real quick. That, back in the old days when we had a traffic team and I was on it, there was a known, whether you lived in Lane County or not, there was a known sentiment that you had to slow down. You needed to watch your P's and Q's. We even had a little nickname called the Green Hornets because they knew if you came in here and acted a fool and drive like a jerk, you were gonna get stopped, you were gonna get a ticket. It's the freaking Audubon out there right now. I don't know. I mean, it is dangerous behavior and nobody cares, except for when all the crashes happen. And frankly, we get calls every week of, why didn't you come to investigate this crash? Well, because we can't. We don't have the bodies for it. And what's better than investigating a crash? Preventing a crash. And again, like Tom said, we should not be trying to win this award that we keep getting every year for being one of the worst counties in the state for fatalities. We have 2 of the worst highways in all of the state for fatalities between Highway 58 and 126, and we need to be doing something there. It is the worst thing in the world to go tell somebody that their loved one has passed away because somebody else was acting a fool. So I think what we presented today, again, is the minimum of what can we do to really move the needle, to provide or to show the community that we can impact their level of service. And again, I can take questions anytime, but I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to the district attorney to kind of talk about what he would do to also move that needle. So.
Excellent, and I'm going to focus largely on kind of minimum needs as well, but I'll start by both thanking and cursing the Sheriff's Office. They did a fantastic job of putting together their presentation and slides to lay out the kind of historical, how we got to where we are and the needs that we all face within the criminal justice system here in Lane County. So I won't have to go back into some of that historical analysis the way they did. I'll curse them because you'll see my slides are very plain and vanilla, and that's because I have to create my own stuff on this, and I have very little time to do fancy backgrounds and the things of that nature. And that's in part because I am the policy director for my office, I am the PIO, I am the person who goes out and does all the outward-facing stuff for our office. There's nobody in my office to spare, essentially, to do these things. They are all very busy people doing, trying to handle the community's work. And so these assignments fall on me. So while I wish I had fancy slides to present to you, ultimately, this is what you're gonna get from me.
That might be the most powerful statement you say all day.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk about current realities for our office, and you've all heard me talk about this before. We don't keep, as Oregon District Attorneys Association, the kind of useful stats that the Sheriff's Association does. They are very good at keeping statistics in a way that we just, as prosecutors, have never really prioritized. So I don't have stats to show you my other, what colleagues from other communities have in their budgets. But what I can tell you is that we have one less prosecutor than we had in 1985 when we had 40% lower population in Lane County. And that tells the tale of what's happened here from the district attorney's budget over the course of time, is it has not risen to the degree to meet population growth, and we are seeing the consequences of that play out in my office daily. We have 24 criminal division prosecutors handling 6,700 law enforcement referrals per year. Those are all cases that have to be reviewed and decisions have to be made on them. And that number is artificially low because Lane County relies on its municipal courts in a way that no other community in the state of Oregon does. We have very robust municipal courts in this county, and other counties simply do not. They do not use municipal courts the way we do. On top of that, we do over 350 probation violation per year, over 1,300 set-aside and expungements, 120 public records requests and appeals. Those are super time-consuming and require attorney review on each and every one of them. We have 7 victim advocates. 4 of them are actually grant-funded, so they're not general fund positions. They handle almost 28,000 services in 2025. That's an incredible statistic for those 7 people. Over 1,700 petitions they assisted to get protective orders. So very vulnerable people needing to have the protection of the court to ultimately keep folks away from them. And we served over 3,500 victims last year alone. We're down to 2 investigators. We used to have 6 in the mid-1980s. We're now down to 2 in the criminal division. And I'll let you know that all my slides will pertain to the criminal division because unlike death investigations or family law, whenever cuts come to our budget, they come from the criminal division, in part because we get our 2/3 funded by the federal government in our family law division, so the bang for the buck on reductions doesn't make much sense there. And the mandated need for our death investigations has only caused us to have to increase the number of people that are there just to meet our state mandated requirements in that division. So anytime we've been cut over the course of the last 25, 30 years, it has come directly from the criminal division. So that's where our need currently exists. Next slide. These are the proposed additions that I have, and these are all designed to create maximal community impact. We need essentially 10 new deputy district attorneys in my office. The way we've broken them down as we began to talk about need is a need for 4 DDA 1s, deputy district attorney 1 positions. These folks handle misdemeanor cases. And our misdemeanor levels are the highest in our office. Those folks are underwater right now already. And I'll remind you, that's with municipal courts being as robust as they are here in our county. We have caseloads that run an average of somewhere 300 to 350 for a misdemeanor attorney, which is way, way too high. We would add 4 deputy district attorney 2s for reference. Those are pretty much low-level felony cases. This group of people handle the second most burdensome caseload in our office, and they can be spread. They're journeyman attorneys in that they don't focus necessarily on any one particular type of case. They handle everything, but it's at the lower level felony cases, which we have a lot of in this community. And then we'd add 2 deputy district attorney 3 positions, which are higher level felony positions. We'd add 4 victim services advocates. The commission may remember that one of the things that the community, when we asked them, was found most compelling was our service to victims and protecting the statutory and constitutional rights that victims have in the process. We agree. The district attorney's office, the members of my office all agree. We would love to be doing a better job of serving our victims in our cases. And to do so, we just need more advocates involved. 7 people doing 3,500 victims per year does not leave a lot of touches with those victims. And so our victims are often left to feel like they don't know what's happening with their case in the criminal justice system, are not aware of what to expect in a case, and our attorney staff just simply doesn't have adequate time to sit down and have the kind of meetings that we need to be having with them to make them feel like they are up to speed on what's happening in the case and what the realistic expectations should be. We're looking specifically at 3 victim advocates and 1 bilingual advocate, as we have need for an additional bilingual advocate in our community. We would add 2 more investigators to help provide assistance in serving subpoenas, doing the kind of follow-up investigations that our law enforcement community just can't get to in sufficient time to ultimately have us prepare for trials and things of that nature. Our investigators are tasked with doing all kinds of things, not the least of which are things like background investigations for everybody who come into our office. And so because that's so important to get additional hires in, it often detracts from their ability to do things like serve subpoenas, listen to jail calls, and all the other investigative things that are required of them in our office. So we need help there. And then the legal secretary positions and office assistants are the necessary support staff to support especially the 10 deputy district attorneys that would be added. Next slide. Specifically, with regard to where we would add these positions, we're looking at adding 2 deputy district attorneys to the domestic violence team. A deputy district attorney 2 for lower level felonies, and a deputy district attorney 3 for the higher level felonies that exist on that team. This is really what we see in the realm of domestic violence cases, are kind of these C and B felony type cases that are strangulations and serious assaults and things of that nature that they're trying to handle. And as you can see, we currently have a 3-member team of the domestic violence team, which includes the supervisor, who's a senior prosecutor. That's just not enough to handle the 861 cases that we got referred in 2025. Particularly because the dynamics of domestic violence are just far more complex than an ordinary theft or even typical assault type cases. These are high emotion cases, ones where there needs to be a lot more time invested both in victim communication and some additional follow-up and investigation, in part because it's not uncommon for a domestic violence call to come in that law enforcement deals with. They make an arrest because they're mandated to at the time, and it's only after the offender gets out of the home that then the can of worms of what their life has been like for a long time begins to spill, and what looks like maybe a serious but not too vexing case on the front end becomes a very elaborate case that needs all kinds of additional follow-up and time to pull apart and prosecute in the end. So that is the intent with regard to 2 deputy district attorney positions. Next slide. And then we'd add remaining positions essentially to the general felony teams, their general felony and misdemeanor teams that we have, and we have 2 of them. 4 deputy district attorney 1s to handle additional misdemeanor cases, 3 deputy district attorney 2s to handle the lower level felony cases, and then 1 deputy district attorney 3 to handle some of the higher level felony cases that exist within the office. These are more experienced people who also, beyond handling cases like serious burglaries, sexual assault, robberies, and heavier, more significant assaults, they provide some additional assistance to our major crimes team to, when they get overwhelmed, our deputy district attorney 3s will often carry some of the spillover that comes from that team. So adding another member at that level of experience would be crucial. Hey, no, that's fine. You can move on. You can see our general felony teams handled 5,100 referrals last year. Victim services, again, the 3 advocates and 1 bilingual advocate is the proposed addition, adding to the 4 victim advocates that we have currently, and then 2 bilingual advocates that we currently have. You can see the list of assignments that ultimately they carry, and it's a lot. The expectations and burdens that apply to them are tremendous, and they do a magnificent job under very difficult circumstances. So much so, I have to add, as a point of pride, our supervisor, Lori Solano, actually won the Victim Services Advocate of the Year award through the district attorney's office last week due to her work in this realm. They are all tremendous. They work long hours, well beyond their shifts to ultimately get all that needs to be done accomplished. And so we are super proud of the people that work in this division, and they just need help. They just need more people to do it. Here's where the rubber meets the road and why this has maximal community impact. One of the designs that we want to get back to is having a designated mental health deputy district attorney. We've had that in the past, and unfortunately those people have largely burned out and left our office. But when you have 30 to 35% of your cases going aid and assist today, we need somebody who has some particular expertise in the realm of mental health to be able to come in and handle the bulk of those cases to alleviate additional burden from deputy district attorneys who, while very good at law, do not have the kind of expertise necessary to deal with very complicated psychological cases. We also want to create a designated training prosecutor. This is necessary in the sense that the law today changes so rapidly, it's incredible. When I started my career, it was every 2 years, the legislature would get together and tweak some laws, and then occasionally the Court of Appeals would ultimately make some decisions that would change the nature of the law. Today, every Friday, the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court drop new cases that dramatically change the law out from under not only deputy district attorneys and the judicial system, but the police officers who are ultimately out on the street having to execute that law. So having somebody who is keeping up to speed with the weekly changes that occur within the criminal justice system, and then having the ability to train our prosecutors and train our law enforcement partners on what those changes are, is going to mean that we are adhering to constitutional and statutory obligations out in the community much more appropriately than we currently are. I've long felt very bad that our office has not provided more assistance to our 11 law enforcement agency partners in doing trainings, but we just haven't had the ability to be able to do that because we can't get out and take the time away from our caseloads to ultimately be able to prepare and then present changes of law and presentations for them the way that I believe we should. We want to cover, one of the things that we'll have to do if the sheriff's office has additional deputies come on is we're going to have to cover an expected increase in LCSO cases that'll be referred to our office. Additional deputies on the street means more cases that they will ultimately present to us for criminal prosecution, and we'll have to cover that. I also want to alleviate the burden that we see in our struggling municipal courts. We are starting to see the failure of certain municipal courts already in our community. Cottage Grove, Junction City, Oak Ridge have all struggled to keep up with the the volume of cases that they have. And then frankly, they have budgetary problems of their own. They've had to close down their jails and things, which has caused a circumstance where they can't get people to even show up for court appearances, and your system's not very effective if you can't get people to even show up for court appearances. So I've worked out some kind of private agreements with like Cottage Grove and Junction City that when they have real vexing offenders in their communities that need attention, my office is taking on some of their cases to be able to ensure that those problematic community members are having a criminal justice system somewhere address them so that those communities can feel safe in their homes and on the streets of their cities. But I'd like to do more, and frankly, we should be doing more for those municipalities. we want to make sure that we are meeting our statutory and constitutional obligations to victims, meaning specifically more time and resources being devoted to them. More deputy district attorneys would mean more ability for our attorneys to have this kind of sit-down meetings with our victims and their advocates that really is the expectation for our job. But we're just not, we don't have the time to be able to do that right now. And I think that's a tragedy. Our victim services advocates are doing the very best they can, but ultimately there are times when victims really deserve to hear from the attorney in charge of their case, talk to them about the case, and give them the straight scoop of what's to expect. Increased number of total cases, we think we can handle as much as 1,200 more cases per year with this number of attorneys. And with the biggest effect being that we're going to be able to provide, because we will see reduced caseloads per prosecutor, we're going to see better legal analysis, better charging decisions from our office, and justice for not only the community, but victims and the accused themselves. When we have adequate time to be able to evaluate our evidence and make critical decisions, you get better justice. And with the caseload levels that we have now, especially when it comes to in-custody charging, we often do not have adequate time to fully evaluate the evidence before we are obligated by statute to submit some form of charging decisions, which means our attorneys are forced into a position where they're making decisions on serious cases where civil liberties are at issue without being fully informed of what the evidence is. And I think that is a tragedy for everybody, the community, victims, and ultimately the accused people in our community. So that is really the objectives from our perspective. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Chair, we have 2 more slides.
Yeah.
Unless you want to do, and then we can wrap up, and then if you have questions and discussion with the board, so we'll try to do this briefly. For a long time, and oftentimes when we talk about the funding challenges in our public safety system, we're focusing on the lack of resources, the specific dollar amount that we need to get to, and the services that aren't provided. What the sheriff and the district attorney have presented to you today is the value proposition to the community at the bare minimum. And so it's really the first time that we've had this conversation, which you saw a specific list of exactly the positions that the sheriff and the district attorney would propose to add, exactly the services that the sheriff and the district attorney are proposing to increase as a result of the increased funding. And so I want to also hit on in the task force's recommendations, they recommended 3 different funding, kind of 3 different numbers to try to get to on an annual basis. The first was 27 million, 22 for the sheriff, 5 for the DA. That's on Commissioner Lovell asked, is that's an annual number. So 27 million was to get to the state average for the sheriff's office of deputies per 1,000. So that would accomplish that. And then the task force said you could go to 55 million if you included the jail levy, so you could get rid of the jail levy, add that in here, do that. And then 95 million is this complete replacement, taking the sheriff and the DA completely out of the general fund. So we've started with the smallest number that the task force recommended, the 27 million number. The sheriff kept referring to the Lane County Way, which is, I think we all understand, the Lane County Way is trying to find the way to provide the greatest level of value to the community at the lowest price point possible. So now what you've seen the sheriff and district attorney come back with is a number even lower than what the task force originally recommended as their lowest number, 27. They've come in at 15. They almost cut that number in half. So they've gone from 27 million down to 15 million. And the point here is to say, what the sheriff and the DA wanted to do is say, what is the minimum amount we could ask from the community, but still increase value, still improve community safety. That's the number, 15 million, is as low as we can go and still move the needle. So we want to provide you two slides here. One is on property taxes. So this tells you if we were to do a local option levy, what the 15 million versus the 27 million, because we're kind of looking at that as a range now. 15 million being the lowest, 27 will increase value and increase impact if we go higher. But I think you heard both the sheriff and the DA say they acknowledge, we all acknowledge that our taxpayers are willing to contribute towards services if the price point is right and if they see enough value to it. But there is a weariness. And so that's what this is really reflecting. So $15 million, which would be approximately $12 million to the sheriff's office to provide the service. The sheriff indicated approximately $3 million to the district attorney's office to increase what the DA outlined. So if we did 15 million on a property tax, that would be 35 cents per 1,000 of assessed value. At 27 million, it'd be 62 cents per thousand. For context, the jail levy is it is 55 cents per thousand. So the 35 cent per thousand amount is about 40% less than the jail levy. On an annual basis, that 15 million comes to $82.44 for the average assessed residential value of 235,000. So that number, that annual number, you break it down, you can say it's 40% less than the jail levy. On a monthly basis, that's $6.87 per month, which is about $4 less per month than the current jail, just for comparison purposes than the current jail levy is. This scenario assumes that we would maintain the jail levy in place and voters would support anywhere from 35 cents to 62 cents. So that's the property tax scenario. And then this is the payroll tax. This is the other option that the task force recommended, was looking at a payroll tax. Again, you see 15 million at the minimum amount, 12 for the sheriff, 3 for the district attorney, up to 27 million, which is the task force's minimum recommendation. That, we'll add some caveats here. That is countywide. That is at $15 million, that would come to $1.70 per thousand of wages. And then if we look at the average annual wage of $64,314, that's a little over $109 annually. And then up to 27 million, that goes to $3 per thousand, $192 annually. A couple caveats on the payroll tax. I will just say, the property tax piece is pretty straightforward because we do it. We collect property taxes, we assess it, other districts do it. We know how to collect, how to assess, and how to collect that. And so this number, we've worked with the assessor's office to determine the property tax number. On the payroll tax, we don't currently do that. We don't assess a payroll tax, we don't collect a payroll tax. There are some logistical elements that would need to be factored in there. So I just want to provide a little bit of context there that some more work probably needs to be done on the payroll tax side. But we want to just give you the rough numbers of what this would look like under those scenarios, property tax and payroll tax. Again, this is new. The 15 million is a new number that has not been presented to you yet, and it is the sheriff and the DA's effort to say, let's see how small we can get this number down to do it. Try to do this the Lane County way. Add as much value at the lowest price point possible.
Can I ask a quick question about the payroll tax piece? Because that can be a regressive tax, and as I recall from the report, it was recommended to consider things like exempting minimum wage earners or what, but this is not doing any exemptions, right?
Yeah, thank you for saying, because that was the other
So
point.
no fixed income exemptions,
Correct.
no low wage earner exemptions.
It also doesn't, we do try to just keep this for simplicity. So
Yeah.
this is not a proposal.
Right, just
None
making
of
sure I
these
was
are
understanding
proposals.
this, yeah.
They're just trying to sketch out, if we were to look at doing this, here's what it would look like. On the payroll tax front, it does not make any assumption about a split between employer and employee.
Right.
It doesn't make any assumptions about exemptions. You don't really do that on the property tax front. That's why it's pretty straightforward. On the payroll front, you could do that. So a lot of things that the board would need to ultimately decide. Oh, there's someone here.
Devin.
Oh,
Devin had her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Trieger mentioned fixed income Social Security is not considered payroll, so that is not included in this. That would not be part of what's considered payroll in our community.
So if individuals that are on Social Security would not be assessed a payroll tax, right? So the last thing that I will say on this, and then we'll turn it over to commissioners for question, is we're not asking you to, I mean, I think we all acknowledge that if we were in your seats, commissioners, we would still want more information. I think the idea here is that, one, we want to present to you what we have now come to as a range of options, and seek your support for us, and largely for the sheriff and the district attorney, to carry this message, this presentation, this added value to the community, to seek the community's feedback on these options, and then bring that back to you. So we want to get your questions, your comments, and hopefully your support to continue those conversations with the idea of coming back to commissioners with more information. And I think anything else before we turn it over? Okay.
A couple more notes real quick. Okay, to the board. Mr. Farr.
I'm anxious to hear from everybody on this, but this is the presentation. These last two slides are what I'd like to focus on first, is what do we need to ask for? And personally, I'm committed. Let's go for both of these on the higher end immediately, because either one of them is about the cost of a box of these a month, but people don't understand that. I spent the morning over at Peace Health and talked to people about what I was going to be doing the rest of the day. And I told them this is part of what I was going to be doing. People typically have no idea the impact and how small the cost individually of the impact is. So no small part of our task is to make sure that people understand what they're getting for their money. And it really is, it's a matter of marketing. It's a matter of telling people what they're getting and having them believe it. When we tell people we have the lowest, one of the lowest permanent tax rates in Oregon, well, people look at their tax bill and say, where is that? Well, the city of Eugene does a really good job, 26 per 1,000 for parks. The city of Eugene, Bethel School District, 4J School District do a really good job of adding on to that. So that's what people think about, and we need to have a way of explaining to people what it is that you so clearly and eloquently explain to us here in this room. How do we get it to 380,000 people so that they fully understand it? The professionals who work in the community, the people who have impact on others, that they understand what it is that we are seeing. And Chris, you have this one slide that I love. It's community benefits. A list of what do I get for the money? And Sheriff, you have a list of how do people in cities relate to the services of the Sheriff's Department? Well, the list is property return from burglaries, search and rescue, domestic violence, people living in the city, recreating the county. We have to get that message out. And I'm looking at Devin, because she's the messenger in the room right now, and your staff getting the message out, because we need to ask for a lot. But we need to explain to people that they're getting a lot for what we're asking for. And when's the time to do it? Well, the time to do it is right now. We can't leave this room thinking, let's wait for the next presentation. Let's wait for more accurate information. Let's get the ball rolling immediately. You have my support on the very minimums you're asking for right now. That's easy. That's not even a major thought process. Is what's typically called a no-brainer. Of course, we need to go forward with it, but we need to explain to the people in the doctor's office this morning who had no clue what the county does for them, no clue how I rely on the DA's department. I think back when I lived in Lane County, the names like Snake Brooks. Anybody here remember Snake Brooks? Of course you don't, because the DA doesn't get to do things like that anymore. Snake Brooks killed a sheriff's deputy, or killed an investigator. And everybody knew Snake Brooks because they were being investigated. The DA's department was at the forefront. Those days are gone. We need to get that to the point where people who are committing the crimes in the community are recognized as criminals in the community, and the things that they do have an impact on everybody in the room. Who investigated Diane Downs? How many people remember Diane Downs? That's, the things that you do are a part of our everyday life, but it's become such a shadow of the past. And we need to be able to reinvigorate that. I'm not very eloquent at saying what I'm trying to say right now. Let's just get the ball rolling is what I'm trying to say.
Well, to that point, DA Perosa's number was 4.6 extra cases a day. Is that was what that would provide? That's a lot of people in our community every day.
Well, if I may state one thing that happened to me personally at Orchard Point, at Richardson, we had a car theft, and not going to go into detail on that, but the residential deputy from Veneta came to Richardson and helped us, within 12 hours got the car back, and it's because the sheriff's department was involved. But then we couldn't investigate who stole it because there just wasn't time for the investigators to investigate who stole it. Got the car back, didn't get any resolution on who stole it. So it's the follow-through is so important, and being able to articulate that to people far better than I just did.
Commissioner Lovell.
Awkward pause, I'll fill the void. Thank you very much, Chair. Great presentation as well. I think coming back with a minimum for the constituents and the public to peruse that would make a difference, I think is the right approach. I think I want to commend you guys for doing that. You said there's there's basically 7 words that the two of you said together that I think the public needs to hear. And Sheriff Wilkerson, you said that you'll feel a difference. And people want to feel the difference in their community. And like I've said before from this dais, is that if we don't have a safe community, we don't have a community. We well agreed on that. And if we're going to feel the difference that our community is safer, that's going to make our community, just as business goes, more economically feasible, more attractive, all the things that benefit a community that feels the difference. That's a better community. They become better. And then DA Perosa, you said that you'll get better justice. And that word is something that even like when Commissioner Farr was talking about his vehicle being stolen, he got his car back, but did he get better justice? The answer would be no. He didn't feel the difference that this would have made. And then, your example too, I want to do your math because your math is a little fuzzy, Commissioner. You said it's a box of those bars. It kind of made me gag a little bit because I didn't want to eat that many bars. But the fact is that the increases that we're talking about, we have a very popular, very worthy, publicly acceptable option levy. And I want to ask just, the option levy of the jail would stay in place, and this new minimum local option levy, Mr. Mokreisky, that you described is in addition to that. So I think the levy is, at 52 cents right now, the jail levy? What is it? 55 cents, yeah. So the 55 cents, and then we would add another 35 cents to that, giving ourselves basically, $1.10? 55 and 35, that's 90 cents. So are we going to do these in 2 separate, or are we just going to say the new option levy going forward would be 90 cents? Would that be our marketing ploy for the public, or would they be 2 separate things is my first question.
I think that we've contemplated them as being 2 separate things. The current jail levy is up in 2028. So May of 2028 is when that would be renewed. Timing is an important point here because the board did approve funding for
1 year.
For 1 year, for, was it 1 or 2 years? We did 2 years in this budget cycle. So we have until 27, 28 fiscal, through the end of 2020, thank you. So June 30th, 2028 is when the funding for the current, this would add to that, obviously. So
we're a year off a little.
Yeah, I think there's a question here of does the board want to, and I want to be clear, because this board has said you're not interested in enacting anything. You said you want voter, so I think that, particularly for the property tax component. You could look at 27 is the earliest, May or November of 27 at the time.
Well, I think that's good that obviously we're not going to make that decision. I think the voters are going to make that decision. But I think it's also important to know, when I said about Commissioner Farr's comparison about the box of bars there, is that the average property owner, obviously, I just put right out there, I'm not a fan of payroll tax. I think payroll tax as a business person is just a nail in the coffin about attracting new business to our area. So I'm not a fan of that at all. But if we were to take take the local option levy approach, and you're saying that the average value for that would increase the average property owner about $63.58 a year. But we have to also consider, as we're talking about this, is the commercial property owners, the people that own businesses, the people that own apartment complexes, those things that are valued at $1 million plus. Those particular individuals are going to be on the burden for what I figured are just roughly right now about $320 more a year. So that all rolls downhill as well, economically speaking, when you look at rents and leases and those kinds of things too. So I think, cautiously going forward, it's not just as simple as, it doesn't increase us that much, because it does increase us much, especially when we're adding other things like, waste management services and all the other things that affect commercial property owners as well. That's a big part of the puzzle. Now, is it the least painful part of the puzzle? Maybe, but we do have to at least think about that as well. So we have to do something, and the options are not great. Either we, start cutting timber and get back to the 1980s timber. Don't see that happen in the next couple of years. I see that improving a little bit in the next couple of years, but I don't see it taking over what we need to do here. So I would get behind more discussions about this local option levy, just to make sure that we entertain input both from local property owners and commercial property owners in this process. I think that would help. Like I said before, not a fan of the payroll tax, and that's where I'm at.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work it's taken to get to the point where you've been able to narrow down who and how much it would take for you to move the needle. I know you've had lots of meetings over this, and knowing that we do struggle to pass particular public safety and other emergency services levies in the community, especially recently. This is a hard discussion to have, but necessary. I really like the idea of the resident deputy positions. And I've expressed that before, but I have heard over and over again, why should I pay for, more patrol if I don't think I'm ever going to see them? And with resident deputy services are assigned to different areas of the county, you absolutely get that connection. They know that they're serving their community. They know who to call, as you already know, being in those positions in the past. That's the part where I think people will be most interested in knowing that that service is actually going to affect them, and that they have people that will respond to them in their community. I think that's the best part of the sell, basically, to residents. There's a lot in here. Obviously, the community benefits has a lot more than that, but I think that is really critical in moving forward. You've done some focus groups already, and you presented on the demographics who are most interested in versus a local option versus a payroll tax. And I think we'll need to talk about that more too going forward. But I'm also very interested in what we think the community education will be, and going out to a larger, broader audience with these options presented today. I think the community is eager to hear about it. I'm asked about it on a regular basis, and was wondering if there's a plan for that going forward.
A plan for community engagement, what that
Yeah.
would look like?
It is, the wider that we keep the proposal, the more difficult it is though. And so this is getting us closer to having something specific that we can talk with people about. We'll need to do more polling as we get closer to a possible deadline to make a decision about whether or not to put something on a particular ballot. Certainly we'll need to do community outreach meetings, but really I want to try to keep the focus on quantitative data and feedback as much as we can. Qualitative certainly has its place, but I want to make sure we're not relying on more old school community meetings that we simply hear from the same 6 folks again, and their voice is important, but we need to hear from them and others. And so we're looking at how can we get that mix. But one of the things that I think for me stood out in the feedback that we received from the listening sessions that were conducted over the course of late spring and early summer is people really want to hear what's your actual specific proposal. And so I think the closer we can get to that over the next few months, the more helpful those wider community conversations can become. If we're putting too many options in front of people and they're also being asked to consider multiple options from other agencies, it gets hard to really get the heart of our message across, if that makes sense.
May I jump in for a second?
Please do.
I want to add there's a level of urgency here in the fact that we can keep engaging the community and talking about the various options, which I'm all for, mind you. But until we focus in and kind of develop a plan to propose, then each one of those community engagements, we're going to be saying, well, we could do this, or we could do this, and then we have to report back to you, and then there still will have to be a decision to be made. We have a level of urgency. 2027 is right around the corner, and we have got to the point where we need to start focusing in, because the community engagement really does need to be about educating them about what we need to do or what we're proposing to do, and to see if they buy into it. So I feel like, because I know I'm going to spend most of my nights out in the community once we have a plan. An example of that is, even though we already had a very successful levy renewal on the jail levy, Sheriff Harold and I were out in the community about 60 times on something that we already knew had wide community support. So we need to start focusing in and driving towards what is our action plan, because the community really wants to hear what are the specifics. Devin mentioned this a second ago. A big part of the polling we've already done is, okay, well, that sounds great, but what does that mean? What are the specifics? So that's what we came today, is like, we can give some specifics now, but we need to drive in and start focusing on what is the plan we're working towards.
Chair, I want to clarify, because the sheriff talked about the urgency. And I mentioned that the current funding for the current level of sheriff patrol runs out at June 30th, 28th. That's not right. It runs out June 30th, 2027. The board made some changes at the end of the last year, so end of the last budget cycle. So we're less than a year from running out of the funding necessary just to maintain this current level. But again, what's being discussed here is adding to that to actually increase the value. One other thing, just as you're continuing to have conversation, Commissioner Lovell shared perspective on specifically the 2 funding, and we certainly can carry all of this, including both of the funding options, to the community. But if the board feels strongly, if you all are feeling like, hey, we really want to lean into one of these over the other, it would be helpful for us to know where you're at. Or if you're saying, no, we're open to both, see what the community wants, that feedback would be helpful.
Thank you. But as in levy versus payroll?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So I'll start there. I'm more supportive of a levy. I just think from a campaign and a messaging and a community engagement perspective, and history would show us it has more of a chance of success. I appreciate what Devin brought forward. That was one of my questions. I think some really, for us internally, not for the community, understanding, working backwards from scenario planning, working backwards for timelines from different election days to see what work we would have to do if we wanted it on this ballot versus that ballot would be really helpful. Overall, I would say I am most supportive of us being as ambitious and working as hard to ensure success of that ambitious proposal to meet the urgency and the need that we know we have. I don't want us to lowball. I mean, I get that we want to do something that's going to pass. That's first and foremost. But I don't want to under-ask. I don't want the community to say yes to something and be right back in this same spot.
And that will be part of the next step, and especially if the board is leaning toward one funding mechanism more than another, it actually gives us better ability to go out with another pool where we can test price sensitivity and focus on that versus the mechanism.
So to that, there's a lot of room between 15 and 27 million, between 35 and 62 cents, right? Those aren't our only options. I also would love to hear a little more, probably not today for time and maybe for information about why we wouldn't, if we're looking at 27, put something that is inclusive of the existing levy with language that says that levy will expire in 28. It won't be on your ballot in 28 to put us into one cycle. Because still levies are risky. So I guess there's that advantage too. If we put all our eggs in that one basket and 5 years down the road, something happens. So I get there's pros and cons to all of them, but these are the things I'm thinking about just from a sort of campaign strategy timeline perspective that I would love to hear a little more about. I wonder too, is there ever such a thing as a longer than 5-year levy? Is there 7-year levies? Is there some statutory reason we can only go with 5 year? Okay.
There is a district, you can do a district, right?
Right,
Which is
so
what
that
Deschutes
was,
County
hold
did,
that
that's
thought.
permitted, that's different.
Hold that thought. And what about a phased-in rate, where the first year it's one rate to account for staffing takes time, so we don't get what happened with the first levy where we didn't spend it all and then we gave some to youth services. Are there options around that?
Commissioner, we could just levy less. I don't think you could have more than one question on the ballot is what you have to consider, so I don't think you could ask them for different rates over different
For different years, okay.
But there would be a trust that, you know, if a promise was made that you wouldn't levy the whole amount. That is what we saw in
Which we
Deschutes
did.
County.
Which we did with the, right.
And we've done it with ours as well.
Great.
Yeah.
And also to account for COLAs and other wage and benefit increases over time, right? We lock in at a rate for 5 years, but your expenses don't stay static for 5 years. So these are some of the things I'm thinking about. But overall, for the purposes of today, I really like the constellation of services. It makes it really easy to find the right door to walk into a conversation depending on who your audience is, metro versus rural, somebody really concerned around victim services or mental health versus rural patrol. They all lead to the same room, but it gives a lot of different opportunities, particularly and including for me with folks, much the way I did with the renewal of the last jail levy. And to that, the last thing I'll say is, you know, all of this is, yes, it's about increased community safety for everyone, but it's really almost us developing our own way to leverage, because the amount of general fund we could free up if we're successful with an endeavor like this is leveraging expanding services in other areas that people care about. That was one of the single greatest talking points when I was talking to my folks about the last jail levy renewal, when people would say, well, I want my money to go to mental health treatment and not the jail. And I tell them that is what we spend those dollars on. We're just spending it on adults in custody. And wouldn't it be great to have more resource to spend it before their mental illness turns to criminality and they're in custody? And that's part of what this would do, because it would give us more money to spend on other services within the county that are that more. So it's more, we will realize more than just whatever a levy that passes brings in, because then we'll also realize the savings or the allocations from the general fund, I would hope. Because that's what, 76% of our general fund now is going to?
Yeah, give or take.
Significant. So it's good for the fiscal health of the organization. It's good to expand resources and services for other services and builds community safety overall. So appreciate the presentation. It's just cumulative. It adds on. And so lastly, I would just say I'm supportive. I don't want us to lowball. A little more honing in on timeline and practical next steps depending on which cycle and the relative merits of putting all the eggs in one basket versus relying on a renewal in 28. I worry a little bit about fatigue. We do a new thing in 27 and then go right back out in 28. That's a little tricky. And then the last is, somebody said, I think sheriff coordinating with what other jurisdictions' plans are and whether there's any opportunity to make sure people's ballots don't have a laundry list of increases all in one. Not that that's in our control, but it's good situational awareness to have anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Chair. Oh, and last thing, I do want to put a plug in, just since this is an item people in the community might be tuning in to watch for this report. And thank you to Faye Stewart and the whole team on the task force. It's just a really good grounding in why we're having this conversation, how we got here. So thank you for that work. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds like you've got some direction, and I'll support that too. The levy sure has a lot better a look to it. I think people, when they look at their payroll tax every 2 weeks or every month, they see it, and it gets people headed in somewhat the wrong direction. Just look at Eugene's payroll tax, for example. It doesn't have the best connotations added to it at this point. I don't want to undershoot either. I'm concerned if we don't go for enough money to where people are seeing the difference out there. I mean, I think that maybe it's just because we're rural, but one of the biggest selling points we're going to see is the resident deputies. I don't know if you do anything where they're required to live in a certain response time of where they're working. I know that would get tricky with people moving around and things, but I hear constantly from Florence that they miss having resident deputies that lived in the communities or near the communities. People like seeing the cars with the names on them. It makes them feel safe. And I think that's something that we really need to lean into. And then the presentation was great, and it just goes awesome with the public safety funding task force work that was done. You have some really strong points up there, Perosa, that hit home. I mean, those 1,200 cases, there's people every day that you and I talk about that are upset that a case got dropped or something got moved, or we just don't have the capacity for it. And I think there's a real hunger for public safety in Lane County, and now's the right time to go after it, and go after it aggressively. I mean, you've got a board that's 5-0 all on the same track to get something passed that's gonna move the needle here in Lane County, and I'm ready to go for it. With the 3 PIOs that are in the room. So, okay, anything else from anybody? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, we appreciate it. We've got a little more business to do here. We're down to commissioner business. Does anybody have any announcements? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Seeing no announcements, any commissioner comments or remonstrance from yesterday or today? Mr. Farr.
Thanks. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the presentation by John Helmer and Hollis.
Yeah.
I thought it was a wonderful presentation, and to hear Hollis's words come through John's mouth is really powerful. And if you watched Hollis as John was talking, Hollis was saying those things. I mean, you could read everything, but he has more to say, as does John. And I was wondering when we get to future agenda items, if we could have a report, perhaps where we could have a conversation with Hollis and John and other people from the Parks Department to talk about the significant impact of what we've done in parks and what is on the horizon. I would just love to have a little bit more of a conversation on that. And again, just a roundtable discussion about the work that's been done and leveraging the work that can be done. It was wonderful to see Hollis there, because when you think about David's chair, you think about, we've all seen him. It's a pretty remarkable piece of machinery, but we have such a limited number of them that and only 2 or 3 people can be using them at any one time. I think we have 2 at Mount Pisgah. There's one down in Florence, but that's pretty restricted. So anyway,
Is it you add that to say future board assignment?
Yeah.
And then because we get our parks, it comes back. Would you just like more time added to that presentation or its own presentation?
Specifically to hear from John and Hollis.
Okay.
Because they seem to be the ones that are most attuned to the work that is being done and the most eloquent in presenting, their perception of it.
Okay.
Also, I told John I'd ask for that, and you're not asking. So.
Okay. Vice Chair?
I too just wanted to appreciate those folks that came out to speak and noted that I received the email from John and Hollis. I think we all received an email from them that they were hoping to hear feedback earlier in the meeting. And so I appreciate them tuning in later. I appreciate them coming out. I have seen Hollis out on his wheels at the parks. It's fabulous what kind of accessibility we are giving to folks all over Lane County with those additional pathways for people with wheelchairs and being able to get out actually on the beach. So fully in support of doing more of that fabulous work.
Mr. Trigger?
Thank you. Yeah, I also received the email and appreciate it. And the Wednesday Wheelers have been before us before, and it's always great to, when they come out. And I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity. This is really for the administrator to consider and work with staff to do a little more of incorporating that work with our equity work, because it really is equity work when you're ensuring physical access to spaces for everyone. That is equity work. So I don't know if there might be an opportunity to do any, or at least making some warm handoffs and introductions so that the EAB can be, or the EPAB, still used to calling it the EPAB, can meet some of those folks perhaps and hear from some communities around issues they have access in county services that they're not already connected to. So on that note, and then I had another thought about an assignment.
Yeah.
I don't know how we determine employee recognition and who is to be recognized, but the DA mentioned in his prior presentation that Lori Solano at Victim Services received an award, and I think a lot of the DA's office's work, it flies sort of under the radar. Partly it has to because of the nature of the work, but the Victim Services work and what giving the community an opportunity to hear more about that could be really impactful and helpful in the item we just had before us. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm glad. Yeah, thanks for bringing Hollis up. I'm glad the story I keep telling about him being the first one to be in one of those chairs at the top of Mount Pisgah is true. So it must have been something to see. So, review assignments?
Chair.
Sorry.
I didn't want to be outside of the loop of that email that we all got. I mean, Hollis is, as we've seen before, is just an inspiration. He's a joy. He's a super heavy advocate for, disabilities and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to apologize to him for his expectations of us not being able to respond to him, because he is such a moving force in that arena. He makes us people who take able-bodied things for granted and really look at it in a different way. And I can't imagine the joy that he had either for being the first person at the top of Mount Pisgah as well. I mean, we looked at those David's chair and you're looking like, oh, those could probably go anywhere, but they really aren't, the four-wheel drive vehicle of the century. They still have to have pathways and access and work that takes them to where we just kind of hop over a rock and take it for granted. So I certainly appreciate not only his enthusiasm for what he does, but he doesn't let what's in his way get in his way. And so I just wanted to appreciate with him. And at the same token, John Helmer, he is an underspoken hero in our community, and I wanted to really highlight him as well. He does so many things for the Egan Warming Center and those sort of things, and he's just a really solid pillar in our community that I just really respect a lot, and he does profound work, and I want him to know that I appreciate that. So thank you to both of them for doing what they do, and thanking them for allowing us to know more about the work they do so we can do better work for them. So I appreciate them as well.
Vice Chair?
I have one assignment if we're there. It's been a while since the board has heard from staff regarding the Class 4 ATVs, also known as side-by-sides, outside of Oak Ridge. They came to us. And I know there's been interest from the mayor of Oak Ridge, Traveling County, and other advocates for the side-by-sides. So I'd like to ask for us to hear a report back from staff on where they are with that. The chair and I have been in some of these conversations. There are 3 roads in particular outside and around Oak Ridge that are county roads that they're interested in specifically. The sheriff has also been in those conversations as well for public safety concerns. And I'm hoping that we could have our interim public works director come back and give us a report, and indicated that she could bring an item back as early as September or October to the board if we're interested.
Are you thinking a report first and then action later, or a report with possible action?
I'm thinking a report with possible action because they're at that point where they can present us with something.
And just a little more update before the presentation, Oak Ridge has allowed all the side-by-sides inside the city limits to drive around, and then Forest Service roads have allowed them, and there's just a couple roads that are county roads that stops them from getting to where they need to go, and sounds like it'd be very helpful for their community.
And it's specific to that particular geographic location. It's not the
Yes.
dunes in Florence, for instance. It's just Oak Ridge.
Yes.
Yeah, similar to what Lakeside's done down south on the coast, where they've opened up 2 roads so you can drive from town out to the dunes, and that's the only places they're allowed. And there's certain parameters. It's not 4-wheelers and things like that. It would just be the side-by-side cars. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Right?
So I have 2, I just want to verify that Commissioner Buck's request, report back potential action on ATV access, particularly around the Oak Ridge area. I thought I saw head nods for that. And then Commissioner Farr's request for a roundtable discussion on, I heard accessibility in parks, particularly with the 2 individuals that spoke yesterday under public comment. My thought is that we can connect with Brett Henry and see when the next Parks Levy update is, and maybe we do a work session here that includes that, so Brett can provide you, it's maybe focused on accessibility in parks, and then invite both of those individuals to attend, and if that works for commissioners. Okay. And then your request for commissioners know that, you know, we love doing employee recognition, so we just want it to be something substantial, right, and significant. So if you ever have anyone like the DA mentioned, and so I will follow up with Devin Ashbridge and have her connect with the DA and bring those forward. So, but if you all are aware of employees that are out there doing things and they have some significant, substantial impact or award that they've received, we love bringing them forward and recognizing them. And thank the 5 of you, because it's really meaningful for those individuals, but it also lifts up, you know, the employees that are doing great work as an example of the behaviors that we want to see in all of our employees.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to read executive session if there's no other business. Our next meeting will be August 26th, or excuse me, August 25th. Okay, Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. The session is to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. It is held pursuant to ORS 192-660-2H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purpose listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or otherwise record an executive session. Verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. Let's get back here at 11:05. Let's take a break.